Hey, welcome to the Fuel the Fight podcast. I'm your host, Lieutenant Colonel Nick Barringer, and today we have a very special guest, Kevin Edgerton of 18 Alpha Fitness. We're going to talk about all things fitness, what Kevin does, how his training philosophy, how he trains folks up, and most importantly, for some of the listeners here, his Army story. So without further ado, Kevin, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Nick. It's been a long road to get here. About 3 different times we rescheduled.
It's been challenging with different things going on, and then the ice storm in Texas, this last time. But I was like, hey, we're gonna get you on. I've known, I don't know how long we've known each other.
Met at 6 years.
Yeah, now. 6 years. Met at a tactical, I think, strength conditioning.
Yep, in Orlando.
In Orlando, and just stayed in touch. And when I came back to San Antonio, had to reach out to my man Kevin.
Yeah, at that time I was working at Lackland as a strength coach for the Special Warfare Human Performance Squadron, and so Lindsay, good dietitian as well. Probably my favorite Air Force person. I really enjoyed working with Lindsay.
Yeah. Lindsay Torres, a great human, great dietitian. So yeah. But before we go to the Air Force side of it, let's talk about your Army story, because you've got a very interesting one and storied and a lot of history there. And I know you've told it before on the Jedberg podcast that I listened to. That's great. But if you could kind of lay it out here, kind of talk a little bit about your Army story and what you did.
So graduated high school in 1987. Didn't have a direction at the time. But before I graduated, I was like, there's no way I was joining the military. And then some stuff happened in that summer, and I was like, I got to leave. You know what I mean? I have to go do something. My father was in the Marine Corps. And so I went and seen a Marine recruiter the first time. And when I came back home, I told my dad that I saw a Marine recruiter, and I'm thinking about joining. My dad was like, you can join any other branch, but you will not become a Marine. And that's the polite way he said it. The unexplicit version was like the FUR joining the Corps. So he's like, he told me to go back and go to each branch. The Air Force wouldn't have me because my ASVAB scores was horrible at the time. And I wasn't going to ride on a ship for 6 months at a time and hot bunk with somebody. So I joined the Army, and I became a combat engineer. First duty station was in Germany. The wall was still up, people, and then the wall came down while I was there, and then transitioned into Desert Shield, Desert Storm. I didn't go to that one just because I was stationed in Germany. I was trying to get out. At that time because I only had a 3-year contract and I was going to go to college. I was already signed up for Indiana State University. I had my schedule and everything, and I got stop-lost November 26th of 1990, and then I had to get a 4187 signed by a full-bird colonel to release me, which he did. But long story short is when I flew from Germany back to Fort Dix, New Jersey, where you out-process the military, they forgot to put the 4187 in my manila folder because I was a good E4 and I didn't look inside my packet to make sure that 4187 was there. So I got held over until after Desert Shield, Desert Storm was over. Finally got out. Then I went to Indiana University for a couple of years. That didn't bode too well. And so I within 30 days of me getting out, I was like, damn it, this was a mistake. I should have just stayed in. So I tried to get in, but at that time they were doing the biggest drawback of military service at the time. Cold War was over, so it took me like 3.5 years to get in, but during that whole time I was in the National Guard, going to college at the same time. And then when I came back in, I had a couple goals, all right? One goal was to go Special Forces. Second was to become an officer. Don't ask me why. I don't know why I was going to become an officer. It was just one of those things. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You set goals in life, right? And then the third was to become a PA because when I was in going to IU, I was wanting to become a nurse. So I came back in. I got to go to Fort Hood. I love Fort Hood. No, I don't. Hated it. Did NTC rotation, six NTC rotations with First Cav. Got to deploy with them to Bosnia. Good times. Went to selection. My first time I went to selection, I failed miserably. Broke every metatarsal. Well, grade 4 stress fractures in every metatarsal on both feet. I asked the doc what I should do, and he's like, you can continue, or you'll be hard broke for probably 18 months, 2 years, or you can come back in a year. I was like, well, I think I'll come back in a year. I came back in a year. I wouldn't say I crushed it, but I was well prepared. Coming from a heavy mechanized unit, going into nothing but rucking is a difficult task if you haven't done that before. But I could ruck with the best of them now because I've been doing it for quite a while. So I went, and finally, once I got selected, it was great. Went back to Fort Hood, IOut process, and I went to Airborne School. And lo and behold, at Airborne School, on my 4th jump, I broke my left ankle. And the integrity thing that I have, I was handed my whole packet, my certification for my Airborne, and I was like, hey, I went up to the black hat. I was like, I didn't do this 5th jump because I broke my ankle last night on a night jump, and I literally hobbled up. And he's like, oh, okay. He's like, where are you going next? I was like, I'm going to Bragg to go to the Q course. And he's like, so he takes my paper, he rips my Airborne certificate in half, takes my jump log, takes a black marker, blacks it out. And I was like, well, what do I do now? I'm not Airborne qualified. And he's like, I'll just go to Bragg. In 6 months, you can jump, you do your last jump at Bragg within 6 months. So I drive up to Bragg from Fort Benning, and he's like, 3rd day I'm there, I got a knock, and it's a Green Beret, and you're like stunned, you know what I mean? Because at the time you're not accustomed to Green Berets, even though after you become one. And he's like, the S1 lady needs to see you. And so I go see her, and she's like, I got some bad news and I got worse news. And I was like, how do you have bad news and worse news? She's like, the bad news is you can't start the Q course. I was like, I know, I got a cast on my leg. She's like, the worse news is Army regulations have it to where if you go TDY en route from one school to another and you're not fit to meet the second one, you have to return to your original duty station. And I broke down in tears immediately because that means I had to go back to Fort Hood. So I went back to Fort Hood. 2.5 years later, rehabbed, had 2 surgeries there, came back, went to the Q course, became an 18 Echo finally. After becoming an Echo, I went to first group at Fort Lewis, did a couple of J sets, and then that second part of those, those goals that I had was to become an officer, put my OCS packet in, became a chemical officer, was fortunate enough when you're a chemical officer, a lot of people don't know, but when you're an officer, you can't go back become a detachment commander until you're a captain. So you have to wait till you're a first lieutenant promotable to apply to go back to the Q course. But I was fortunate enough as a chemical officer to go to 3rd Battalion, 10th Special Forces Group. When I arrived there, they were already downrange, and I went to OEF 3 in Iraq. Had some really great leadership there. Lieutenant General Dorsey Rogers was my battalion commander at the time. He was a real influential on my career. He led from the front. You see him working out every day. There was nothing that it's just that guy that, he didn't ever seem stressed, even though, you got combat operations going on. He just knew how to lead people, you know what I mean? And he just led from the front. Really, really enjoyed the time when I was there. So became a first lieutenant promotable, finally applied back, became an 18 Alpha, went back to the Q course for the second time. The second time I got my knife, because the first time they didn't have the knife. The second time I got my knife. And then I became an 18 Alpha, went to Okinawa as a team leader, served 3.5 years in Okinawa. Great time with my guys at 1112, and then in Alpha Company, went to OEFP. And then retired in 2014.
And here you are. Well, no, so Kevin, I want to unpack some stuff for the listeners because, although your story painful at times, there's a lot of good lessons learned in terms of, 1, set goals, right? And then 2, be prepared for setbacks. I feel like
perseverance, man.
Yeah. It's like, what is it? Mike Tyson, everybody has a plan so they get punched in the face. You had several proverbial punches in the face along your process to that, but you just kept on. You just, it was like, hey, I broke my foot. All right, I got to train to come back. Like there's very few people. You're the only one I know of who goes through a selection course, gets injured, and comes back a year later. Usually, by then people decide to do other things in their life. Mm-hmm. So the fact that you just kept coming back, or you go through Airborne School, you break your ankle, you get up there, and you get sent back, and now you got to go back through the whole process again. But I love it because you never gave up. You just kept putting one foot in front of the other even when it was broke.
Yeah, even when it was broke. Yeah.
To try to get to your goal. So you're at 18 Alpha, you get out and you're in this kind of you come into the fitness industry now, like because you had been into fitness your whole career.
Yeah. You're when you're trying to do a special operation, if you're not into fitness, you need to find something else, because you got to be physically fit. You know what I mean? All those setbacks that you have when you're training for something, you know what I mean? Your plan has to be solid. You just can't wing it and expect to get to an end goal. I was fortunate enough in like '98, after my second surgery, I became a personal trainer. And then when I was in Iraq, I found out about CrossFit. Ooh, that bad word, but probably one of the best, if overall changing the world view on fitness is CrossFit.
Right.
Hands down, you go in for a gym for an hour and come out. In my opinion, that was the biggest eye opener that I had. Do I train differently now? Yeah, because that was like almost 20 years ago when I started that. But I still use a lot of their philosophy. My main things is mobility, yoga, and breathing, and those three things will help you your longevity of your career as well. So it's been a great path. Did get my master's degree in exercise physiology too. Before I retired, that was another thing. You know what I mean? I set that goal when I knew my time was over as an 18 Alpha, and I was waffling on what I wanted to do with the rest of my career, rest of my life, not career, because my career was ending. I had three things that I was going. I applied for PT school, got accepted. Applied to PA school, got accepted, and then my strength coach in Okinawa, his name is Mike Hall. He's my mentor as well, and he had just got there. You know what I mean? The Thor 3 program had just stood up, so I knew a lot. I thought I knew a lot about fitness at the time until you meet a professional strength coach, right?
Right.
So it was great to have him there, and then my John Hill was my physical therapist. You know what I mean? So I interacted with him a lot because that was kind of like the path I wanted to go. And then Mike, he was like, "Why you want to go back to school that long and get your doctorate?" He's like, "Just go get your master's in exercise physiology. You're a shoo-in for strength coach and special operations." And I was like, "Okay," so I did. And when I got back to Bragg for my last 18 months, I finished my master's degree in 18 months, which is it's not easy feat to do.
Right.
While you're working full time and driving, I was living in Apex, driving to Bragg, which is an hour away, back and forth every day. So that goal planning, that setting goals in life. If you don't do that, there's what are you doing? You know what I mean? You're just spinning your wheels.
Yeah, no, that's great. Well, and then once you make those goals, attacking them,
right,
like you did. Can you talk a little bit about so you get out and now you're doing you're working with Air Force Special Operations. Can you talk about that transition and then some of the work you did there?
Yeah, so I retired in 2014, and I got fortunate and lucky to I applied on USA Jobs for a strength conditioning position here at Lackland Air Force Base. Just applied, and I got a call, did the interview. The guy that's sitting on the board, his name is Jason Lyden. He owns Lackland CrossFit, lo and behold. So we had a lot in common. So we're, you know what I mean? It wasn't really seem like it was an interview. It was, us talking about CrossFit. And I almost turned the job down. I would have turned the job down because we had just moved from Okinawa back to North Carolina. And you move a lot in the 26 years that you're in the military. My oldest, he's 20 now. He moved 11 times. And so when we got to North Carolina, right when I got out, I worked for ROTC gig at the University of Chapel Hill. Horrible place. I don't know if you know Chapel Hill, you know what I mean? Tar Heels. I was an ROTC instructor there, and I was contracted. And so I went and told my lieutenant colonel, I was like, hey, I did an interview, but I'm going to turn it down because I really don't want to move again. and I like what I'm doing here. I still get to, be a part. I get to develop young officers. And he's like, oh, I appreciate that, Kev. Well, that following Monday, thank goodness I didn't write that memo yet, because I take my time sometimes just to process things. I got told by my contracting company that in 2 weeks, all jobs are gone. All the contracts that we've held, they cut them in half. And UNC Chapel Hill was one of them that got cut. So I was like, oh, I guess I'm moving to Lackland Air Force Base to become a strength coach. So when I got here, you go see what it is, right, and find out the processes, what you're actually doing. At the time, they had NDOC. It was the old NDOC where the PJs run through. Combat control, and NDOC at the time was 11 weeks. It's 2 weeks of prep and then 9 weeks of NDOC. Combat control selection was 2 weeks long. Tech piece selection was a week long. And so, you figure out what it is these guys need to achieve those. But we'll back up a little bit. So once you get into the Air Force, we'll talk about that. You go to BMT. After BMT, you go.
So that's like basic
training, like an Army. And then, and it's not, they don't do real PT there back then. Now they have the strength coaches integrated with their PT sessions if you're going special warfare. Back then, when I got there, they were atrophying. They didn't just, the first thing that gets cut was PT. So these guys were coming over and trying to go to these, pretty, special operation selections, which aren't easy. And a lot of them were failing. And if they failed, then they came what was known as battle. And I ran what was battle. And we had them for 8 hours a day, every day of the week, 5 days a week, to train them, to get them ready to go back to the selection. Or if they got injured while they were at selection, we trained them, rehabbed them up to go back. And again, back then we didn't have a physical therapist, we didn't have athletic trainers. It was me and about Coach Greenwald, which was our swim coach. He was in the '76 Olympics, and then about 6 to 8 enlisted guys. And we ran, it was anywhere from 100 to 200 candidates every day, and just working them out. And we had different levels, We had guys that just came out that, didn't pass the PT test, so we had them on one program. Then we had more advanced guys, which are combat controllers, which were getting ready for their big, even though they'd already got selected, they still had to go to another test at Pope, which was usually their pass rate was like less than 18%. And then the PJs really didn't see too much of them. They ran their own little schoolhouse. Only time I got to interact with them is if they failed, and they allowed them to come back. So yeah, it was unique at the time. It used to be the 342nd training squadron. There were 78 of us that ran that whole squadron, and that was just a squadron. Now they have evolved from a squadron to a group, and now into a wing. Now there's 550 people doing the same job that 78 people used to do.
Wow. So, when you're seeing these recruits, come in for special warfare, and I mean that is an arduous selection. I know Army, we make fun of the Air Force a little bit, but having seen some of their selection processes, it's probably, and going through different selections, probably one of the most difficult selections, right, to be a PJ.
Oh yeah.
Out of.
So I don't know, the rest of the world here has never done I did a pre-dive for about a week up at Lewis, and I quit because it was, there's things going on in my life, but water is the most humbling thing that you can ever do, and to go to, NDOC, every day you're in the water, and that, to know that you got to get in that water, know you got to do 50-meter underwater swims, know you got to ditch and don your equipment, know you got to bob, know you got to swim 1,500 meters every day, and it's like clockwork for 9 to 11 weeks. Oh my God!
It takes a level of mental toughness.
Right. It's a whole nother level, and then even the controllers have to. They don't do the, they didn't do NDOC when I was there. They've done different things, but the water, just to get through dive school is a humbling experience. Now they all revamped everything, and now they just go through what's called go to BMT still. Then they go to prep, special warfare prep, which is an 8-week course. Then if you get selected, after prep you go to ANS, which is a 21-day assessment and selection. After you get selected, if you're a PJ combat controller and special reconnaissance, you go to pre-dive. And then after pre-dive, you go to dive school. If you're a TAC-P, you go to BMT, Special Warfare Prep. If you get selected at prep, then you go to the TAC-P Level 3 course. That's their selection now. So it's all rechanged for the better, for less timeline for the guys. And now they got field developers out across the whole country for the special warfare community. So if you need to, go see an Air Force recruiter and make sure you're working with a developer. Most of those developers are former controllers, TAC-Ps, special reconnaissance, or SEER guys. So they're in the community. They know how to get you guys ready.
No, that's great. What was the biggest weakness you saw with the young recruits coming through? Is there anything you could identify that you would see kind of over and over again was a theme for people who just didn't make it?
It's not like one set thing. There's more. Well, I guess it is. It's always one set thing. It's the mental. They're not mentally prepared for what they're about to do. You know what I mean? You have to set that goal and stick with it. Whether you have a little setback, you still have to. You know what I mean? Just because there's a setback doesn't mean that's the end of the light. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's not the end of the tunnel. You can come back and do it. Which I saw a couple guys. They made it so far, and then they get cut. And then when you get put back into the regular Air Force, you got to wait like 3 years to come back. So if you want something, you have the ability to train. You got 3 years. My God, I wish I had 3 years to train back up to do that again. So if you want it, you got to actually do it, and that's all mental.
Yeah, no, it's great because your mindset, it tells a lot. The way even you frame that is what most people get cut, and you're like, I got to wait 3 years. That's it. Whereas you're immediately like, man, I got 3 years to train and crush this test.
Right.
Like having that mindset to switch. Then what's some of the outside of the mindset? What's some of the keys to making it through selection, through this selection, or even selections you went through? Like if you take the mind, you got to be mentally tough. You got to be tenacious.
Right.
That's a given. What other ways can maybe somebody listening to this prepare to set them up for success?
So I do. I have 18 Alpha Fitness. I have a bunch of clients, and they hear from their friends. I had a client the other day who was like, I want to do a 12-minute mile ruck per mile. You know what I mean, for 12 miles. And I was like, why? He's like, well, that's what my buddy did. I was like, okay, that's great, but what's the standard? It's 15 minutes, right? It doesn't say less than 15 minutes would be great. Anything less than it is great. But if you're going to shoot for just one thing, you're neglecting something else in your repertoire that you need, because selections it's a gamut that they're testing. They're not testing just how fast you can rock, how fast you can run, and I don't know if you know this either, but nobody cares how much you can bench press. Nobody cares how much you can deadlift. Nobody cares how much you can squat. They want to know if you can handle the stress day in and day out. So it goes back to that mental thing. Are you mentally prepared for what you're about to endure? And the way you do that, in my opinion, is in my programming is, a lot of stuff looks easy on paper until you actually execute it. And it's body, a lot of my stuff is body. The first 4 weeks of my programming is nothing but body weights. When you do body weight exercises and you think you're a master at that, go ahead and do something that's pretty tough and challenging. And what that does is, one, that gets your mindset right, because after you do it, then I asked them, they're like, man, that was tough. I was like, well, what do you think you can do to improve that? I was like, do you think you take little breaks? Do you think, if you recover a little bit longer, if you stretch the X, Y, and Z muscles, do you think that would help? Or what would you do differently? So I asked these different questions to them, you know what I mean? Because I want to you got to get mentally, because you're going to be in a leadership position. You're going to ask to do things that are next to impossible. And then do you have the ability to think that, if I ask a question, maybe I'll get an answer. You know what I mean? If you ask somebody else besides you know what I mean? Just ask. And that's what I'm trying to get these guys to do.
So yeah, so I like that. Think about the process, and then just because it's simple doesn't mean it's easy. And right. Yeah, that's great advice. One of the things I want to talk about, because we have a mutual, friend or contact, Andy, who was with me at West Point,
right.
And something that you really drilled into him that I won't say. I mean, yeah, it took me by surprise. Was like the breathing and your breath work, because I don't know if that came along later, if we just never talked about that, but that was something that I wasn't like really tracking until I heard about you. Like, hey, this is a must. You've got to do this. Right. So one, what got you into kind of the breath work, and then two, why should everybody be doing it?
Well, we'll go back to that when it was special warfare was NDOC. One time I had some NCOs come to me and they asked, we got these two really good guys. We really like them. You know what I mean? And they just can't get over. And at the time, it was 70 push-ups in 2 minutes. And for longer guys, that's 6'3" and above, that's a long movement to break 90 and come back up and get 70. Both of these gentlemen were not that big. They weren't at that tall, but they just, I think it was a mental thing, and they just didn't know what to do. And what I didn't like about NDOC, which I'll bash every time, is they tested them every Monday. Which your body, the adaptations aren't going to take
in
effect
a week. Yeah.
in a week to week, and then you're doing all the pull work. You're still working them out every day. It's, you know what I mean. And then you're going to, stimulate the central nervous system even harder because you're testing them, and these kids know they're getting tested. But we won't talk about that. So, the NCO came to me and he's like, "Hey, we got these two guys. They're really good. What can you do?" And I was like, "How long do I got?" They're like, "You got 10 days. I mean, 2 weeks." I'm like, "What?" I was like, "Well, how long did you have them?" And they're like, they went through NDOC, they went to the development, then the NDOC, and this is they're recycled. This is their second time. So I'm like, "You guys had them for like 18 weeks now?" And they're like, "Yeah." I was like, "Well, why didn't you get me back then?" You know what I mean? If you knew they had a problem with push-ups, like, we just didn't think about it. Whatever. I was like, okay. So I was like, I'm gonna write up these 2 weeks worth of push-up improvement program, and I wrote it up, and I showed them every movement that there was, and that was on a Monday. That Friday, I went to a seminar up in Chicago. It was for fascial something, you know what I mean? It wasn't related to breathing, but I remember this lieutenant, Espo is his name. He's a really good guy. He's I think he's a Crow. He's a Crow now, and he was here at BAMS. He got blown up pretty good. He's a combat controller, prior enlisted guy. Went back, became an officer, and he told me about this book. He's like, "Hey, Kev, you had an opportunity. You need to read this book, and it's called What Doesn't Kill Us by Scott Carney." And so I'm at the airport, and I seen that book, and I was like, let me, I've got a flight home. I'm going to read this book. And I'm reading this book on the plane, and it's Wim Hof. Scott Carney went to the Netherlands to debunk Wim Hof's techniques, his breathing techniques. And Scott Carney at the time wasn't no physical specimen. And the first thing Wim had him do was like, "Hey, all I want you to do right now, get down and do as many push-ups as you can." And, Scott got down, and I think he did like 15 push-ups. And, and then Wim was like, "Okay, now we're going to do this breathing technique." And it got me there. I was like, so he's going to, what? You know what I mean? I'm like, what? And so he's like, he did these 3 cycles, belly, chest, head, 30 breaths. And then on the exhale, he had it hold, right? And then, for as long as you can. And then you take a deep breath in back through your nose, get the nitric oxide in your system. And then you squeeze your muscles. You do that for 3 rounds. And then on the 4th or 5th, whatever, you get comfortable with, you get down and do push-ups on a breath hold, and you do as many as you can. Scott did on that after the 4th round, I think he did like 28, and I'm like, there's no way possible that somebody can go from 15,
to 28 off of a breathing exercise.
Off a breathing exercise on a breath hold. I'm on the plane, and I almost got in the aisle.
You almost got in the aisle,
because I'm breathing in the plane. Right, but I didn't. So that was I got back Sunday night, and I really couldn't sleep that night because I was super excited. I was like, no, I got to test this, right?
Yeah.
There's no way that this breath works, And so that morning I call over to NDOC. I was like, "Hey, can I get that lieutenant and that PV2, I think at the time. And can I get them over there?" Like, "No, they're going to do the damn test. They're doing the whole test that day. It's their, you know what I mean? Before the final eval." And I was like, "Okay, whatever." So I had all these other students, you know what I mean? I got students all the time. I was like, and I got my senior combat controllers over. I was like, "Listen here, we're going to do this breathing thing. I want you guys to sit down, belly, chest, head, 30 deep breaths, show them how to do it. And then on the exhale, hold. Okay, you hold, and then take a deep breath in. And these guys are very, so I they would try to hold forever. I'm like, okay, we're done. And then, start belly, chest, head. So I just had them hold for like 45 seconds. After the fourth round, and I was like, before we started, I was like, you guys know what you guys normally stop at, right? Because it's a 2-minute test. You're not going to hold your breath for 2 minutes.
Right, yeah.
It's not, you know what I mean? And some people can, but you're not going to be able to move. So I was like, you know what you guys normally stop at. You know what I mean? Because mine, when you take a PT test, I'm sure you know exactly what that number is. Mine used to be like 50. I would stop at 50 before I'd go, you know what I mean? Start, moving a little bit. And they're like, yeah, coach. I was like, okay, so remember what that number is, and remember when you get done doing this. And every one of them, like, increased by 10 to 15.
Wow.
On a breath hold. And then
on
a breath hold. Then I was like, okay, what else can I do? You know what I mean? Because we got more time. And so I had them do, breathe in on a push-up, going down, and then exhale and push-up. Breathe in, going back for it. And everybody crushed. Like, it was not even close, right? So I finally got that lieutenant and that senior airman that afternoon. After they did all that test, and I was like, did you guys pass? They're like, nope, I got the lieutenant got 64, the senior airman got 60. I was like, all right, we're going to try this breathing thing. I ran it through them. Lieutenant got 78.
Wow.
Senior airman got 74. I was like, you remember those push-ups I told you to do? Throw that shit out the window. Pardon my French. Throw that out the window. All I want you to do is practice this breathing technique. That next following Monday, they all passed. After that, I had about 25 guys come to me that were on the cusp of doing that to get through that. And so I was like,
sold.
Yeah. Send me to the first, you know what I mean? I went back up to the command. I was like, hey, I want to learn more about this. They sent me to Vancouver to do a deep dive with, in the book it says, find Casper. Wim Hof's a great guy, but find Casper to teach you how to do the breathing technique, because Casper was a biology teacher and was his #1 lead instructor. And I think Casper has now left Wim Hof and he does his own thing. So I did that. And then, once you start going down the rabbit hole of breathing, I'm trying to gobble up as much stuff as I can. Then I did Oxygen Advantage. I can't remember the guys off the top of my head. But Oxygen Advantage is another one. I've done Performance Free Dive Institute, because that correlates with breath hold stuff, going deep dive. I did that course. We had Casper come out to Lackland for a 3 or 4 day deep dive with the instructors. I did go on and become a Wim Hof instructor as well. And so, you know what I mean? And that's just on breathing, right? That's just for performance. There's other breath work techniques that you can do for immediately recover. So once you're, at a selection, you can, do breath work while you're waiting to do another event. And you can, I can do that and get up and be like, oh, I'm ready to rock and roll.
Yeah, that's
the technique that I showed, taught. It's Adam, right?
Andy. Yeah. He was telling me about that recovery, because I think he was doing it at night or whatever, like this breath work. So I'm fascinated by this, and this is, man, we get to talk about this more, because it's really so I've got the books, and so what is it? What does not kill us?
What doesn't kill us by
Scott Carney. Oxygen Advantage, Find Casper. I'll put these in the notes underneath, because that is very unique in that I've talked to a lot of other strength coaches and stuff, but nobody has said, hey, you have to do breath work. This is something you have to do.
And I'm not going to toot my horn either, but how many other strength coaches have been to a selection that I've been to?
Right.
How many, you know what I mean? And I'm being, this is a military, this is tactical stuff. None of those strength coaches, there might be another anomaly like me, but none of them have done what I've done in the military.
Right.
You know what I mean? So I know what that feels like. I know what you're going to do mentally and physically that other strength, they think they do, but you don't know until you actually do.
There.
Right. And I did pre-ranger down at Benning as well. Yeah. I've done a lot of stuff in my career, and then watching it for 7 years over here at Lackland, and that's all selection stuff. You know what I mean? So I just don't think any other strength coach has what I have when it comes to a selection.
No, that's true. There's definitely a unique perspective, from having gone through it and then to,
Be a practitioner.
it was like, as a dietitian, I had, kind of studied binge eating, but it wasn't until after I got out of Ranger School that I know about binge eating. I was like, oh no, this is binge eating. So, I get
pound burger that you guys go.
Yeah, I get exactly what you're saying there. So how would you incorporate kind of breathing into a program like basics? I know we can't go into the weeds now.
So
but
every on an 18 Alpha Fitness app, I have every day you're going to wake up, do a mobility, 10 to 15 minute, wake up your muscles, and then an additional. It takes you about 5 to 7 minutes to do some breath work in the morning.
And that's every day.
And that's every day.
You're doing breath work in the morning, and then after that, you might program it in for, an event like push-ups or something like that, and then you have that recovery in the evening.
Yeah, the recovery one. So once once you get ready closer to, matter of fact, when I get done with you today, I'm going to call a candidate that's going to selection in a couple weeks, and I want to make sure that he understands how to do the recovery breath work.
Okay.
And it is all my YouTube stuff too. So I have a couple breathing techniques on there.
Another thing you do, you work with, you talk about like your background in rucking. I mean, went through a very arduous selection course multiple times.
Just nothing but rucking.
Yeah, nothing but rucking. So you do some work with Go Ruck as well.
Yeah,
Can you talk a little about that? And
so I'm an independent contractor with Go Ruck, where we go lead events. Either it's a 4 to 6 hour one, which is called the basic now, the tough, which is 10 to 12 hours, or the heavy, which is 24 hours.
Wow. I can't get over that. So civilians pay money to do this.
Yes, they do.
They
pay me money to do this. It's great though, because you get to, I get to go across the country and meet different people. And then when I lead the events, what the first thing I teach them?
Breathwork.
Breathwork.
All right.
And I have them. The first thing they do is going to get down and do as many push-ups as you can. Then I do them breathing. The short little breathing tutorial, and then how many push-ups can you do on the breath hold, and then we might, if we're in the Pacific Northwest, I'm going to throw you in some cold water as well.
Nice.
Just for recovery, but I'll get in with you. I'm not scared. It's but Go Ruck is again, you get to meet unique people across the whole world. I think I've done over 125 events now. This coming April, the 21st to the 24th of April in Jacksonville, they got what's called Sandlot. I would highly recommend it. They're going to have Jason Khalipa there.
Famous CrossFitter, right?
Yeah, right. The Ready State, Kelly Starlett's going to be there.
Okay.
Stu Smith is going to be there. My good friend Fran from Jetbird Podcast is going to be there. He's going to be, once they get done speaking, they're going to come off and they're going to do a short mini podcast as well. But it's nothing but, and then there's a obstacle course called the Nasty Nick. This is only the second time they're running the Nasty Nick. The first time was in 2013 up in Virginia in a ski resort, and I was there as I watched the Belly Buster. You know what I mean? I just helped out. I was a volunteer because I was trying to get into Go Ruck at the time, and so that was in 2013. No, 12 or 13. Yeah, I think I was 13. Yeah. And so it's
been a while. No, that sounds like a great event. I'm excited. I'm marking it. This is in where you said Jacksonville?
Yep, Jacksonville.
Jacksonville, Florida. Okay.
Called Sandlot.
The Sandlot. I'm gonna write that down. Yeah, a lot of great names there. Fran with the Jedberg podcast, which if you don't listen to that, if anybody's looking for another podcast to listen to, Jedberg podcast, unbelievable podcast, great work there. And then Stu Smith. Been on his show a few times. Too, right? Yeah. He hasn't been here yet, but I think we're gonna have to get him because I've been on his a couple of times. But I love been following Stu since I was a lieutenant.
Right.
He's another kind of OG. Has been around the tactical community for quite some time. So big fans. What about so outside of the two books we mentioned, the Oxygen Advantage and What Doesn't Kill Us, is there any other book recommendations or inspiration?
Breath by James Nestor.
Breath by James Nestor. Yeah, I've read that.
That's he on the backside on the appendixes. He gives you like 15 different breathing techniques, and while you're reading it, he goes over those. The guy had his nose totally clogged up. I don't remember and then just breathing through the mouth, and had it tested, and then you could only nasal breathe too for like 2 weeks at a time, and the test results of it's just so astronomical by breathing through your mouth as opposed to your nose, because your nose is made for breath work, not your mouth.
Yeah, no, that's a great that is a great book. I read that as well, and so yeah, I think, and then he uses like a tape on his lips,
Yes.
right, at night to keep. From,
I tape my mouth every night.
so you tape your mouth every night. to
And don't go buy expensive stuff. You can get the surgical tape. It's the real thin paper one, and I just take off a piece and I just tape my mouth.
Okay, so that's so people are gonna read. Yeah, mouth taping. We recommend mouth taping and
At night for recovery.
For recovery. Yeah, who would have thought? Any other information or recommendations you'd make as far as like people who want to go down this?
Yeah, find Casper.
Find Casper.
Casper.
Like
He lives in the Netherlands. He's a great guy. He's been to my house. He never shot a gun until he came to the house. We took him to
What's
the range.
what's his last name? Is he just goes by
Man, I
Casper?
can't say his last name.
It's like another.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
well I have to Google it. I have to find it, but I like find Casper. That might be the
Yeah,
theme
and
of
it's
the show.
Kasper.
Ka. Okay, so good. Now that I get that right, that'll help me. I'll have to get that information to put in there. And then where can folks find you if they're like, hey, I want to reach out to Kevin and learn from one of the best.
So 18alpha@gmail.com. I have a website, www.18alphafitness.com. And on Instagram, it's 18A_fitness. I'm on Instagram and then on Facebook as well.
No, great. Well, hey Kevin, I want to be respectful of your time. I think we can have you back on at some time and go even deeper into some of the breath work and some of the other stuff. But I think we've given folks a lot to chew on, and a lot of research to do on their own. So,
Yeah.
so thanks again for coming out. Really appreciate it.
Thanks.
And everybody, thanks for listening. I'll have all this information. It should be at the bottom in the notes about Casper, maybe where to find him, along with the book recommendations. But thanks again for joining us on the Fuel the Fight podcast.